Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Got the ballot for the 2025 Football Card Hall of Fame that Ray and Bart and Scott have developed, and I'm looking forward to filling out my ballot. I'm going to do that right in front of you all. They've changed it up a little bit this year. There's 2 years of 10 inductees the last couple of years. This year, they've decided you can vote for 10, but they're only going to induct 5 because football's just not as broad or deep as baseball is. Certainly not as many older pre-war or vintage football cards as there are baseball cards, but still a lot of passionate collectors. Looking forward to a strong vote, and I'm going to add my voice. I will be voting after I'll tell you in advance, and then I'll go vote. I actually had 13 out of the 45 that I think are worthy, in my opinion, but I'm just going to vote once, and I'm just going to vote for 10, and I'll tell you who my 3 alternates are. Again, all 45 are worthy of some consideration. So thanks, sponsors. Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. This is the ballot. I noticed that they've got Harry Beecher back on batting leadoff, the 1988 from the N162 set, the very first football card. He's my first alternate. If I had 13 votes, I would vote for him. It's historically very significant. And frankly, once you put that in, then you're done. You've got the first card in there. It's a worthy card, not by virtue of the player, but just the significance of the card itself. And if there were to be a Football Card Hall of Fame, a physical one, it needs to be at least in the foyer if it's not in the hall proper. And there's a bunch of cards like that maybe wouldn't completely make it, but certainly add to the history of the sport and the way we collected. And I don't remember who it was, but one guy many decades ago was accumulating a bunch of those just in hopes that one day it would go up. I make no judgment there. That's probably smart. I didn't do that, but it's a tough card. But when he saw him, he picked him up. Still, he's number 11 for me. Clark Hinkle, the second choice there, the National Chickle. I think there's no way he will get in because he's at best the third best guy in the set. Rockne is really strong, and Nagurski being a high number is even stronger. However, we'll say this, Clark Hinkle was a great player, and trivia-wise is the only National Chickle card that my dad had. So I don't know if my dad had Nagurski or Rockne and traded for Hinkle because he wasn't a Chicago Bear, but my dad grew up in Chicago when he was collecting those. I don't know that he would have traded it. All packs were a penny. So maybe he just bought one pack and thought football's not a big deal. That's why in 56, when he bought me my first pack, he just naturally thought, I think all cards were a penny back when he was a little boy. Clark Hinkle, sentimental value for me. He'll probably be on my card wall, but not in my Hall of Fame ballot. The next one was Sid Luckman, sentimental choice for Rich Klein. No, he's got the Columbia connection. I don't. Still worthy, but Sammy Baugh already in, and he's the guy. I think once you get the number one card of the set, that's one of the things I look at. I think, is this the best card in the set? Is it memorable in some other way? Was he the best player on his team? When I walked by back in the day when I was doing a lot of pricing and really looking, I don't look at the high-end cards as much now, but back in the day, those were the more influential cards. Did I do a double take when I saw one of those cards? I did a double take when I saw Nagurski, but not Clark Hinkle. Sid Luckman, maybe. Bobby Lane, another good one. But Sammy Baugh, I think, was the number one card in that set. He's already in, so I would just do that. In case you're looking in my show notes, I will put the link to get the ballot. It's a nice ballot with pictures so you can see what you're voting for. One brief criticism, because I love it when people do things, but I'd like it to be easier to find who was already in. And I noticed in some of the comments that what happened to Joe Namath, 65 Topps, a tall boy, some of these that are already in, it threw some people off. So there's got to be a better way to just say, hey, here are the guys that are already in. And the second thing was, and here's the deadline. And frankly, the deadline is February 7th. So that's why I'm doing this on the weekend. This will come out on Monday. You've got a few days. You don't have to do a lot of research. Again, it's very pictorial. It's very easy to vote, and you should just vote once. And I have some other ideas too, but Luckman and Bobby Lane on the 48 Leafs, along with Chuck Bednarik, those are all worthy cards, but I didn't vote for any of them. The 50 Bowman, same thing. Once I got Otto Graham in there, I'm not going to vote for Hirsch or Tittle or Doak Walker, even though Doak was a local favorite. Tittle was great. Hirsch was crazy legs. I'm also not voting for the Topps Felt, Joe Paterno. In the 20th century, you go back before 2000, before Joe Paterno had the fall from grace, he was revered, and that card was revered. That card was the card of, I won't say landmark set because it's tiny, but the felt backs, the advanced collectors knew they were tough, and Paterno was the key card in the set. But I think Joe Pa is not going to make it, and I'm sad about that, but that's based on other considerations. 51 Bowman, I've got to pick Tom Landry over Norm Van Brocklin. Van Brocklin was great, but Tom Landry, as I'm speaking, he lived about 150 yards away from where I'm speaking. He just lived just barely east of our home and was kind of a friend. And I wasn't a peer, certainly, but met him a few times and spent a little bit of time with him. He was a great man. 52 Bowman Large, Frank Gifford. I'm not voting for it, even though it's not a bad choice. The fact that there's a small also, I prefer the larges, but I think that'll just wait. Blanda, I heard John Newman talking about Blanda. Blanda did have longevity, but a lot of that, I think, was based on being an excellent kicker as well, not just a quarterback. So he could be a backup quarterback and a kicker, but an amazing guy that played way into his 40s. You got to be pretty amazing to do that. But 54 Bowman is a blah set to me compared to 55 Topps All-Americans. I love that set. That was always a really cool set. The fact that Thorpe's already been inducted. Next, for sure for me, clearly, the double take, the card walking by, you immediately notice the Four Horsemen, even though they weren't, college was the big game in those days. Don Hudson, a close third, great college, great pro, the first really great receiver, but I'm going to make him wait. 57 Horning, frankly, to me, a distant third after Unitas and Star in the rookie cards in that high series. And Dick, Night Train Lane, I remember him. He was great. He's got records that may not ever be broken, but he's a defensive player. Like I said, he should be in the Football Card Hall of Fame foyer. That card is not high enough demand. It's not. He was outstanding at his position, but not a position that is as collectible as quarterback or Paul Hornung, who had the scoring record for many years. 62 Topps, three candidates there, Ditka, Ernie Davis, and Fran Tarkenton. I have them in order of Ditka first, since I saw him play in college, Tarkenton second, who was fun to watch as he scrambled, and Ernie Davis, only saw him play on TV because he passed away untimely. So I have him in that order. A slight preference of Ditka over Tarkenton, and I did vote for him. And I hope he's 62 Topps. I can't tell you. Those are condition rarities. The chipping on the black borders. If you've got a high grade card of any of those, it's a great card. 63 Fleer. The candidates are Lance Allworth and Len Dawson. Lance Allworth is underappreciated. He was better, and I'll mention that when I get to Steve Largent, why I think Lance Allworth was underappreciated. But Len Dawson, great player. I would probably pick Dawson over Allworth if I have to pick one, but I don't have to pick one. In this case, the 63 Fleer, the whole set is a short print. Those 2 years of Fleer, 62 and 3 are just short printed. Every card is short printed. You just don't see them as much. 63 Topps, Lilly and Nitschke. I obviously prefer Lilly over Nitschke from my Cowboy bias, Dallas bias, but they're both worthy. The other thing I was saying about not noting who's already in, there already are Namath and Butkus and Sayers in the rest of the 60s are already in. But other than that, the ballot skips ahead to 1970. So the 60 and 66, those are already covered. I am not voting for OJ. He's number 12 based on his on-field exploits, his commercials, and visibility until the negativity of what everybody knows about. I'm not going to belabor that, but he's gone now. But he was an amazing player. I did go to the Rose Bowl where they just couldn't tackle him. He'd run over him or past him, or they just couldn't catch him. Mean Joe Green, sorry. John Newman, even though he went to University of North Texas or North Texas State back in the day, I just think he's not going to make the Hall of Fame. Again, a little bit of a condition rarity. Okay, Steve Largent. I'm not voting for Steve Largent. I would vote for Lance Allworth way ahead of Steve Largent because Steve Largent came up in 77. In 78 is when the NFL changed the rules to note the 5-yard barrier that you couldn't have contact with the receivers after 5 years. Until then, the DBs, the defensive backs, were just beating up the receivers. You had to be really tough. So Lance Allworth, to get open, his nickname was Bambi. So he was a great route runner and fast. He wasn't frail, but he wasn't Mike Ditka. Steve Largent was an excellent route runner. I think he's a good guy, has done well. in his post-football career, but I'm not voting for him. And it's an easy blah set. 78 Dorsett, same thing. That's when football was getting a little bit overproduced, I think. Tough to get in mint, but even though he's a Cowboy, I'm not voting for him. Earl Campbell, on the other hand, I am. I saw him play a lot because I think there was still Southwest Conference back in those days, and Texas played SM. That was the card in the set. I always looked for that. Didn't find it very often, especially when I was down in this part of the country. And he doesn't have very many cards. He did not permit group licensing rights. So I've got him in. 82 Lot, 82 LT. LT, I think, is my number 13. I think he should eventually get in, but I don't have him in yet. And Lot, I don't think will get in. Elway probably is number 14. I'm not voting for Elway, at least not this year. He's like a 1A to Dan Marino's 1. Even though he had better team exploits, he was a great quarterback. But Marino's already in. The USFL Reggie White, probably one of the first box sets that really caught on. It didn't catch on at the time. That's why it's more valuable. But that's, I think, the best card in that set. And the fact that he's on the Memphis Showboats, that's just a cool card. So, and Reggie was nothing if not out there. Did vote for Reggie, did not vote for Santa, the 89 Pro set. I think there are variations of that, but I'm making Santa at least wait. This 89 Dion, even though he's in the news now, I don't think that's a great photo of him. I'm not voting for that Dion. I am voting for the Score Supplemental Bo Jackson, if you're following with me. Even though it's a pretty easy card, again, box set, but that's just a classic pose. There's only been one Bo. Dion is known by one name. Bo is probably known by one name. Okay, so if I look at who's already been inducted, there's nobody that's been inducted from the 90s. So I'm actually proposing to the committee they break it up into eras as they go forward. I like the restriction of only 5, but I just think if you look at pre-war, 47 and back to the 19th century, I think you're almost done there. In the vintage era of 48 up to, say, 80, I think that's the lion's share of what's been done and probably what will be the biggest part of the football card haul. And then the modern era, which I consider 1981 to 2000, I think that's the next group that ought to be a big group. And the ultra modern, which I regard as 2001 to now, I'd make them wait. Eventually, you'll move the red zone. But for right now, I think heavy on the vintage and modern. And so the fact that there's nobody from the 90s, I did pick a few. So I did pick the Emmitt Smith, the 90 supplemental. I think that's his best rookie card. I did pick Brett Favre, did not pick Ray Lewis. The Brett Favre is one of the first kind of premium photo sets, let's say. Did not pick Randy Moss because I'm picking Peyton Manning. I think Peyton is so much in the public eye. He's all over the place. He's involved in the hobby, and that's to his credit. But I'll make Randy Moss wait, even though I think he was the consummate, one of the best receivers I've ever seen. Peyton Manning is one of the best quarterbacks, too. And I am voting for the playoff contenders, Tom Brady, the autograph, even though I think it's number 200. Still, it's gotten too much publicity. If you went to the Hall of Fame, you'd expect to see it. That'd be the card, not the SP Authentic, even though that's a good card too. And LaDainian and Aaron Rodgers being in the 2000s, I'm making them wait. So you heard my opinions about dividing up, maybe having a ballot where you pick 3 from the modern, 3 from the vintage, 1 from the pre-war, 2 from the ultra-modern, something like that. So you have some balance. I don't know about the positional balance because, again, this is such a quarterback-driven hobby. I don't think you can force somebody to pick an offensive lineman to get Anthony Munoz in there. Again, it's either an iconic card or it's not, and most of the iconic cards are quarterbacks. And then finally, I noted that it's the top 5 vote getters. I'm just throwing it out there that the baseball writers and the committees look at 75%. Now, they have a smaller ballot with 45. I don't think anybody last year got even 50%. And so there may be some thought, and I'd be happy to discuss it with the organizers, if the threshold, instead of taking the top 5, was taking anybody that got more than 50% and reducing the ballot and stratifying it so that you had choices within that and you could only take those that got more than half the votes. I've really enjoyed the process. I'm going to go vote now, and I hope you do too. Thanks, Ray, Bart, Scott. Keep up the good work, and look forward to doing this for many years to come. Thank you.